The ambulance service is a crucial part of the health system in Ghana. In advanced countries, no clinic or hospital is without an ambulance, especially in deprived areas. The emergency service is, however, spread thin in Ghana. Not every health facility or what you describe as endowed has the ambulance to transfer patients to other facilities when their cases prove too difficult to be handled there. Ideally, the ambulance team consists of different types of health professionals. There are drivers, trauma nurses, emergency nurses, physicians, etc. Before you get to any of these positions, you must undergo some health professionals training.
The ambulance service, as you know, is the emergency medical service system of Ghana. It's in charge of pre-hospital emergency care. And generally, if you hear the term ambulance service, the synonym is emergency medical service, EMS. The reason many countries prefer to use EMS is just to let people understand what the whole system is about. Because the tendency is when you use the term ambulance, people just tend to focus only on the vehicle. So the National Ambulance Service, which is the emergency medical service system of Ghana, is out of acute medical care system, and is normally responsible for providing emergency medical services outside the hospital setting. And definitely, if you remember, the system didn't exist until 2004 when we started with a pilot program. And the pilot program started in 7 stations across the country, at the time just in only 3 regions. And with the pilot program being a success, we scaled up to 24 stations. And currently, as we speak now, we have 130 stations across the country.
To know more about the ambulance service requires that I meet some of the EMT members.
I'm called EMT Stephen Ajman. I am an EMT driver.
My name is Eric Boedi. What we do here is we monitor the patients.
I'm EMT in Kwagiti, basic.
And my name is Martha Krensalakwa. This documentary is intended to educate and advocate for adequate equipping of the Ghana Ambulance Service with the sole purpose of saving lives. Stephen Ajiman is an EMT driver. He tells me he joined the service because he recognized his skill and passion for driving. His foremost concern is that commercial drivers put ambulance drivers' lives in danger.
The most dangerous part of it is sometimes the vehicles on the way, the truck drivers and the taxi drivers, including other private drivers, sometimes if they are hearing the siren, they don't want to give way for the ambulance to go. So sometimes if you are not careful, before you realize, you involve yourself into accident.
So with the dangers they face at the back of your minds, EMT Stephen Ajiman says prayer is a key component of his daily ritual.
I pray to God because sometimes there are some patients that you pick. You don't know what is following that patient. And you'll be driving something closely like human being before you realize it's not human being. Before you realize, you throw the car somewhere. And you involve yourself into accident. And you the one that is saving life, then you become a casualty. Okay. Yeah. So you have to pray to God, hand it the day to God especially. Spirit of God should guide you, protect you, and give you even more knowledge about the driving that you are going to do. When you move and you are going with speed, first of all, you'll be asking yourself, I have people that care for me, always think about me. My families know I'm working. So when you are going, you have to be very, very serious and also go with your experience.
The speed of the ambulance has often been of concern.
Yeah, sometimes, normally because of some of the condition of the patient that is inside the ambulance, we need to get to the hospital quick for them to attend to the patient. Yeah. So that's why sometimes you can see an ambulance run with speed.
But the service says, despite what the public thinks, it regulates the speed of drivers.
We have a speed limit. Really? Yes.
I thought you don't have speedometers on your...
We do have. There's a speed limit. But most of the time when you are far, you could see that maybe the ambulance is speeding.
Yes.
But they have a speed limit that they are not supposed to exceed, that irrespective of the patient's condition. They are not supposed to exceed that speed limit.
Do you monitor that?
We can't monitor because we will not be in the ambulance. We don't have a system whereby we can monitor them whilst they are en route for an emergency.
Professor Ahmed Zakaria is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Ambulance Service.
Just educate the public. Anytime they see an ambulance coming, they should give way. Because I don't know whether you saw some documentary a couple of months back where an ambulance was rushing to someone's house. You know, it was educative, just for you to see that it could be you. So ideally, it could be you. No, we have categories of emergencies. The category A emergencies are emergencies that you have to go with a siren because they are life-threatening, a case of life and death. And the reason sometimes you may see the ambulance blaring away from the hospital is when they are going to the facility. It's not always when they are going to the hospital. Okay. Sometimes the emergency, they have described it and it's life-threatening. You have to rush there because the international response time is 8 minutes. Because our roads are always congested and because we don't respect the sirens, otherwise in many places there are lanes, specific lanes for the emergency vehicles.
Do you think we have abused the siren and that's why people...
It's yes and no. It's yes and no. Some have abused, not everybody. But always give them the benefit of the doubt because you never can know. Yes. And so you never can tell. And therefore, whether it is an abuse, you give them the benefit of the doubt. It's better to err on the side of caution than to assume that they are abusing and it will be an emergency.
Due to what has become the public perception that EMT drivers abuse the siren, many ignore their genuine calls for space. This ambulance driver, who prefers to remain anonymous, just brought a woman in labor to the Greater Accra Regional Hospital. He receives another call back to Medina because there is another emergency that needs to be transferred. To put our responsiveness to test, we decided to trail the driver. Though the world standard requires that an ambulance spends less than 10 minutes to or from an emergency scene, this ambulance spent 19 minutes from the Greater Accra Regional Hospital to the Opebia Junction. This makes just half of his journey.
We had another call to go for another emergency. That's why we make sure then we put on the siren to attend to the next call. But if there's no patient and you are not going for an emergency, you don't use the siren. Not to use the siren.
At least so people you can get used to it.
Yeah. So sometimes you see that the drivers and the other bystanders, they will tell you, "Mufa jantum, mufa jantum." Then we explain it to them. They will be in for them to understand. So the next time that same person is standing somewhere and then they see that the siren is on, maybe there's a third person, second person talking about obi enum. Oh, maybe I'm part of obi. Into normal son.
Too many emergency cases do not get the opportunity to be transferred in an ambulance as the fleet is inadequate to meet the needs of those who perhaps need it most.
You realize that before 2004, we didn't have any organized emergency medical service. And that's why when we had the stadium disaster in 2001, we recorded a lot of casualties. So basically, it was from there, then President Kufuor at the time, then commissioned the establishment of the ambulance service. And since 2004 till date, 13 years now, we've been struggling to make sure the system works. Now, to get an efficient EMS system, sometimes it's cost capital intensive. The reason is that apart from training the paramedics, you also will need vehicles every 5 years to be able to replace the fleet. The reason that system exists is that traditionally, if an emergency vehicle is supposed to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and throughout the month, throughout the year, obviously it will break down at some point. So they give the lifespan to be 5 years. And so after 5 years, the plan is to normally replace all old fleets with new ones. If you don't, then it means that after 5 years, they begin to develop major faults, either minor or major, depending on the type of faults you may have. And some may even affect the engine. When there are minor faults, it's easy to repair and then you move. But when there are major faults where you have engine problems, definitely it takes a while to be able to get the vehicles back on road. That's why around this time, many of our vehicles are down because many of them are developing engine problems.
So when was the last time you had fleets?
2012. So we should have got one 2 years ago, but the procurement ran into some difficulties, which we are trying to work on. And we're hoping that definitely, and the good news is that the current government has the ambulance, improving the ambulance service as part of their manifesto. So obviously the political commitment is there, and we are hoping that in not too distant future, we should get some new fleets in the country.
So recently, at President Akufo-Addo's media encounter on his 6 months in office, I was excited when the ambulance service ambassador, Captain Smart, asked the president what he was doing to enhance the system.
Our emergency medical services in this country is actually collapsing. A country of 27 million people, as of 8 p.m. yesterday, we were operating only 31 ambulances in this country. By statistics, we are losing over 3,000 lives every year for the lack of ambulances, with about 662 innocent pregnant women also losing their lives. Mr. President, my question is, what's your administration doing for a country like Ghana to procure more ambulances to save the ordinary Ghanaian who voted for you?
The ambulances and the state of our emergency health care, I think it tells you about the nature of my inheritance. Yes, see how very bad the cupboard was and how very run down the public services in our country are. We're having to deal with all of this thing, improving revenue generation so that we can be more self-sufficient, bringing greater efficiency into the manner in which we deal with our public finances. There's a whole array of things that we have to coordinate together, which will result in us being able to improve public services in our country. What am I doing? That's why I'm here, is to try and correct the situation about those who decided to put their confidence in me and voting for me.
But I was disappointed. Why? Because I expected the president to say something more, to give hope that he will tackle that issue with some sense of urgency. Due to this inadequacy of ambulances, many stations have been collapsed, leaving a few to cover the country.
The other thing is that currently there are many districts which still don't have the system yet. So we are still gradually increasing. But the reason we always prefer to look at the cup half full and not half empty is that from a humble beginning of nothing, we have 130 stations. From a humble beginning of just 57 staff, now we have 1,700. Initially, we were doing our training at the Fire Academy and Training School. Fortunately, now we have our own paramedic and emergency care training school. Exactly, at King Council in Ashanti region, where we now solely do training for paramedics. And it's also in future supposed to be a facility where doctors, nurses can go for short courses as refresher programs in emergency care to equip themselves and to improve their skills.
Okay. So you've said a lot, but when you're talking about the fleet, every 5 years you need to, how many do we have now?
Currently, we have 160.
160. 130 stations.
Absolutely.
Where are they now? Where are
they? In Ashanti, in every region has
the
distribution. Because Ashanti, we have about 17 stations. Greater Accra, we have about 17 stations.
Those are the largest, I guess.
Exactly. The rest have 16, some have 14, some have 11, some have 10. So it's distributed across the country.
Now, what goes into considering how many stations you have? I know Accra has a very large population, so that may be a factor, but do you consider accidents?
Absolutely. When we started, the first early criteria was accident-prone areas. And then it wasn't long, we realized that there are communities in the rural areas didn't have accidents, but they had a lot of high mortality of maternal cases. And therefore, we had to revise the accident proneness to include places where you had high mortality or high maternal mortality. Now, even after the criteria, it was obvious and it became evident that every community really deserved the presence of a pre-hospital emergency care system. So now the plan is to expand to cover every district capital.
So ideally, how many stations? You say we have 130. How many should we have?
Oh, we should have more than 500.
Wow.
Yes, we should have more than 500. Because if you look at the population of 27 million, definitely even the 500 is woefully inadequate.
Okay, so when we have them and they are placed there, what is the mode of operation?
Okay, the mode of operation is simple. First of all, every ambulance station is manned by a crew of paramedics or emergency medical technicians. There are normally 3, a driver, EMT, and 2 non-driver EMTs. Okay. And so when there is an emergency in the community, for example, the call will always go to the dispatch center, and our emergency code is 193.
To bridge this gap, many people in their time of emergency don't even bother to reach out to the ambulance service. A commercial, or in some cases private vehicles, are the alternatives. On one of my rounds in the course of putting together the story, I met this family at the Korle Teaching Hospital. It was past 9 p.m. on a Friday evening. This woman has brought her critically ill son to the premier hospital for attention. Unfortunately, she was greeted with a no-bed response. She was asked to go to the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, but there too, she was told there was no bed to admit her son. Not even her pleas would touch the heart of health officials. She has returned to Korle with her son to plead for his admission, and the taxi driver, who has been patient for the last 2.5 hours, cannot continue to do this favor because he is certain this woman cannot pay his fare even if he charges per the time and rounds he's done.
I cannot continue going around with you. I came here, then to the Rich Hospital. We are back here again, and there's no hope.
On her return to Korle, she was met by a security man and a nurse and told to take her sick son elsewhere. After desperate pleas, she was advised to go to the Cocoa Clinic if she can afford to pay.
We came here earlier and they asked us to go to Rich because they don't have beds. But Rich also sent us away.
The story ended in disappointment as the family of the ill man moved to seek help, only God knows from where. The taxi driver situation could have been the fate of an ambulance team dispatched to the home of this family, if there was one available at all. According to the Ghana Ambulance Service, the lack of bed syndrome by referral hospitals and sometimes inadequate preparations make transfer of patients complex.
Ideally, unless of course it's outside the hospital, if it is inter-hospital transfer, the ideal situation is that the doctor that wants to refer has to get in touch with his colleague, discuss the case, and then the doctor will give him green light to transfer the case. That's the normal thing. And you should have reasons why you are doing the transfer. We have different categories of transfer. Some may be due to lack of the skills, some may be due to lack of the facility, and others may be due to absence of certain equipment. So when you have convinced yourself that there's a need to do the transfer, then you communicate with your colleague. When the arrangement is done and it's now left with the transportation, that's when the ambulance service comes in. But most often than not, in our setup, they don't do the arrangement. They just refer and then they call the ambulance service. Then they take the case and they realize they arrive there and then there is no bed. So we will really want to take opportunity to appeal to our colleagues. When you want to make any referral to another facility, it's better to make efforts, contact, make arrangements, and when everything is set, then you move. Most often, it's in the interest of the patient for the arrangement to be done. If you don't do that, you take the patient, leave, and then the bed is released, and then they get to the next level and there's no bed. By the time the patient comes back, the bed has been utilized or used, and that can really create inconveniences.
Any other challenges?
The next challenge will be with the receiving hospitals, especially when one hospital is referring a case from the other end. Let me say, Lagina is referring a case to Korle. They are supposed to do arrangements. Lagina is supposed to call Korle and then tell them, I'm referring such case to your end. And then Korle will prepare for a bed or a doctor to attend to the patient. Most of the time, they will call and then they will tell you they've made all the necessary arrangements. You can call the receiving end. They will tell you, yes, we have received a call from them, but we can't assure you of the bed.
Really?
Sometimes they will tell you, oh, you come, we are aware. The ambulance will get there, and the only thing they will tell you, they don't have bed. So they have to detain the ambulance trolley. You have to leave the patient on the trolley. And when it comes like that, it becomes very difficult. When another hospital is calling or there is another accident somewhere, an emergency somewhere, and then we have to dispatch, sometimes we end up, most of our ambulances will be there without trolleys because our trolleys has been detained at the receiving end.
Because they claim they don't have a bed.
Because they claim they don't have bed. And then we can't take looking at the patient condition, there's no way you send the patient back to where you took the patient from. So the best thing to do is to leave the patient on the trolley at the receiving so that they can attend to the patient.
What do you
Both the receiving and the referral, the receiving facilities. Yes, we can't do them anything.
Really? Then they continue doing that.
And that is what they have been doing for years. When the ambulance crew gets to the receiving end, instead of either the nurse or the doctor to attend to the patient, they are now going to send the ambulance crew to go and make folder, to go and do maybe lab tests and other things before they will tell you they are ready to accept the patient. So if you've not done all those things, then the patient will be in the ambulance. And then when it comes like that and there's an emergency, we find it difficult to, as I'm talking now, an ambulance is at Korle for almost 2 hours now. We are finding it difficult to hand over the patient to the hospital authorities. Meanwhile, the caller called and they said they've made all the necessary arrangements at Korle. So the ambulance have to come and then they got there and it's like they said they are not aware. Most of the time, some of the doctors and the nurses, if they want to refer cases, instead of them calling the exact department that they are referring the cases to, they can call a colleague doctor, a colleague nurse that they know that, oh, maybe Naomi is at Korle, so let me call Naomi. Then he or she calls Naomi. Naomi, we have a case there we want to bring to Korle. Then Naomi will say, oh, you come. Naomi will take the call. Instead of Naomi going to the department that the patient should be sent to go and inform them to make inquiries. NAMI will not do that. So at the end of the day, we will call the person and then, oh, we are aware, you bring the patient. When you come, you are finding any difficulties, you call me. And then to our surprise, the moment they get there, the person's phone will be off. So at the end of the day, the patients become the problem of the ambulance crew.
So I witnessed one of such complex situations at the Korle Teaching Hospital when a case was referred from the Pantang ambulance substation. It was one of the few cases where the hospital referring the patient made adequate preparation at the receiving hospital. But upon arrival of the team, they were informed the situation has changed. What ensued was really unexpected.
We were dispatched for an emergency at Legon Hospital. So after picking the patient and coming to the referring hospital, that's Korle, they told us the arrangement they had made and the bed that was reserved for us had been given to somebody just 10 minutes before we got here. So we would have to wait 2 or 3 hours for them to find another bed before they would release our stretcher for us. So we had to keep our stretcher here for the 3 hours that they would keep it until they get a bed before we can go. So we'd have to wait for all that time before we can go.
So tell me, how does this affect your work today?
Well, it gets very tedious because most of the ambulances around my vicinity where I cover are broken down, and I cover all the area. So at a particular time when we are supposed to be here, or you're supposed to be going for other cases, we are supposed to waste all that time here until we're able to get our trolley before we get back to base. And for for all that time duration, other people might be wanting the service of the ambulance, which is parked here, and so we're able to get our trolley.
You've relayed this information to the control room that you are unavailable within this period because you are waiting to get your trolley. Why can't you just leave the trolley and go?
The trolley is it's very important because it's what you use to carry the patient. So without it, you can't work, because when you carry the patient, you can't leave the patient on the stand. You need a trolley to keep the patient on before you can do other stuff. It's one of the most important things in the car. Without a trolley, the ambulance is nothing. Like it's empty.
After several checks to find out if the trolley could be freed for the EMS team to attend to other cases, but to no avail, they called the control room to relay the information.
For a few moments, they might get a bed from the trolley for us, so they are waiting around. So after maybe 10 to 15 minutes, we will go there and see if they can get it for us. Okay.
After more than 2.5 hours of waiting, the team had no choice but to leave the trolley at the hospital. We've been waiting for 2 hours 20 minutes, and one of the EMT personnel has gone to check on the trolley. So he has an update for us. Tell me, what did you find?
Yeah, when we went there to check on the patient and then the trolley, we were. I was told that by one of the doctors that still the trolley is not ready. They were expecting a patient to recover within these 2 hours. That is why he gave us the time 2 hours. But the patient was not recovered. Was not recovering. So we are just in. We don't know how to do.
So you are going to wait for how many more hours?
She didn't give us any specific hour to wait. So we, like 30 minutes, we'll go back. If it's not ready, then we call control and see what we can do.
It's been over 3 hours of patiently waiting at the Korle Teaching Hospital for the trolley to be released for the EMT team so they can go elsewhere and continue their job. But that seemed nearly impossible. So I have EMT Christopher here to update us on the situation and what our next line of action is. Christopher, tell me, so what's the latest?
What you're telling us is that right now we would have to wait some few hours again before you can get a trolley back. That's not possible. We would have to go do other rounds, fill oxygen and other stuff. So we would go and maybe come later and see whether we can pick our trolley up.
I am having my first ride in the ambulance. I'm dreading the speed, but I've been assured it's not going to be speeding as I fear, because there is no patient in it, and that confirms the fact that without a patient, it's just another vehicle on the road, which will not use a siren, which will not speed also. So in the ambulance, there's supposed to be a trolley here, but the story is different. Just because we had to leave the trolley behind at Korle Teaching Hospital after 3 hours, more than 3 hours, because there is no bed. So the trolley has become the alternative bed for the sick woman. And for now, the trolley stand is carrying our bags and equipment. And hopefully later, hours later, the EMT can come for the trolley and continue to their station at Pantime. I am in the ambulance. I'm going to enjoy the ride.